But then you realize that you're not really looking at the beach, because what you're seeing is a stretch of absolutely barren land, and then you have a river flowing. So the river, for the last 17 kilometers of its stretch, flows parallel to the sea. And it is in this area that it opens up and joins the Jatadar, right, which is the space for the small boat fishermen. Right? So the only way I can explain it is it's got something to do with this natural formation. And then as you start walking back, you come to the villages in 3 kilometers, it's all this sand. And then you walk another 1 kilometer further out, away from the sea, and it turns into hard soil, and it's paddy. It's completely paddy from there on, paddy cultivation. Right? So that's the kind of, so the standard structure of subsistence is that most Pankheti farmers will lease half an acre or an acre of paddy land for one crop from one of the people who have only paddy land, right? And that's enough for them to generate enough rice for their subsistence for their family, right? So in that sense, they don't go out to the market for things like rice, etc. They generate it within their own economy. Right? Those are patterns that we quite know in many other parts of India. There are nothing particularly unique about it in terms of how people hedge their bets in terms of subsistence, etc. So this is the local economy, and I just want to point to a couple of things and then move on to a last 10-minute segment of another story I want to say, which has got nothing to do with POSCO, but I also want to think about another kind of space and the creation of a particular kind of space there. The two things I want to point out about POSCO is that it's very unclear as to how one should think about iron ore pricing, right? In terms of the fact that the royalty rate at which the Indian government and the government of Orissa is going to be giving iron ore to POSCO is at around 27 rupees a ton, right? And the market price for iron ore, the international market price for iron ore in the last 2 or 3 years has been at least 10 times more than that, if not more, right? So there's a whole question of why. Second, in the MOU, in fine print, is a set of clauses that says that POSCO is free to take the iron ore that it's mining in Orissa out of India as long as it brings back equal quantities. Right?
In the form of steel?
In the form of other kinds of iron ore that it can use. Right? Now, the justification within the MOU in even greater fine print is that POSCO has supposedly made a claim that even though the quality of the iron ore that's going to be extracted from the Kandadar mines is of extremely high quality, right, there is a particular strand of impurity in it that does not match its particular technology that it's going to use in its steel plant, and therefore it may need to send this ore out and get different ore, right? We can treat this at the level of rumor, we can treat this at any level we want to, but there's nobody in the villages of Jagatsinghpur, in the 3 Gram Panchayats of Jagatsinghpur, who believes that POSCO's demand for a private port is because it wants to go way beyond what is in the agreement in terms of how much iron ore it will extract and export out, push out of the economy, right? Because you can't get iron ore at this rate. Right? And there'll be absolutely no controls over how much ore you're extracting because it's an SEZ structure, right? And you have complete control over what you do, right? So
sorry, I'm not sure I got that. So instead of producing steel, they may just be interested in making money on the ore.
Oh,
yeah,
taking through.
They may just be interested. And what really made us think of that, they may produce steel, right? But in terms of, let's say, if you want to produce 1 ton of steel, if you need X tons of iron ore, they may actually extract Y being greater than X, right? Bill only X as being sent out, but actually send out Y and pull back, X tons of Australian ore for their plant, right? So that is how at least many people in the villages including the leadership of PPSS, including at this point, we are pretty convinced.
I am just very confused about one thing, which is this has not started yet.
No, none of this has started. Nothing
Okay,
has
so
happened.
then, but when you started out with this, that the extraction has increased so much that thing gets red in a moment of
No,
time.
but that's the general area, what's happening in that whole area. It's
But
not
who's
just
doing
POSCO.
it now?
Oh, I mean, everybody from
So
Jindal
everybody-
to Tatas to...
I see.
And that's another part of the story that I'm coming to,
Okay.
which is got to do with the Jindals and Tatas, but far beyond it, right?
Found it.
Right? So this is one part. So in a certain sense, some of our calculations, in our report, that is, if actually POSCO manages to extract ore, send it out, get a different grade ore back in, right? If you do all those calculations, this is a $12 billion investment over 30 years. I mean, we actually have done some math which we've not published, wherein we feel that they'll actually regain their 12 billion in 8 to 10 years. So it's not even an investment in that sense, right? But we haven't put those facts out because we don't have full backup for those facts, right? So that's the reason why we haven't put it out, right? So that's one. So that's where I'm saying that this particular, something particular about this desire for a port when there is Paradeep just 9 kilometers north, right? That's really, really important to kind of think through here in terms of the kinds of spaces I see that's create this kind of linkage between mine, port, plant, and the kind of, the corridor that you create there, right? A corridor that cannot be monitored, a corridor that's kind of outside the purview of anybody, right? Except a company. So I think that's kind of one of the images I want to create of this kind of space that's outside the purview of
So
anybody.
are Tatas and Jindal opposed to it also? Are they, because it's their direct competition. And if they're getting this ore at such a low price, I mean, makes...
One of the things that one of the next projects of the Mining Zone People Solidarity Group is to look at the Tatas, not just in India. What are the rates? What they're doing, they might be doing exactly the same. So they're not. So they're not objecting to this. But Tata's then also using the Indian state to go into Africa, etc. So that's one of our next projects. In any case. We'll come to that. But now I want to go to a different story, and I'll quickly finish in 10 minutes so that we can actually talk about all this. Which is in the south, if you drive from Hyderabad to Bangalore, you go through a district called Anantapur in southern Andhra Pradesh, and in the northern part of the Anantapur district, on the other side in Karnataka, is an area called Bellary. And that stretch from Anantapur all the way through Bellary to Goa, all the way on the west coast, is another mining scene, and it's all I know. Right? There's one very interesting character, and his name is Gali Janardhan Reddy, who is seen as the king of that area. To use a term that's used constantly to describe the politics of that space, of the Rayalaseema space, in newspapers, etc., in Hyderabad, that is in mainstream discourse, it is clan, right? That is, the Rayalaseema area is broken into a series of clans, and it's clan warfare that's going on. So Gali Janardhan is the head of one of the most important, Gali Janardhan Reddy is the head of one of the most important clans in the Rayalaseema Anantapur Bellary area, right? If you want to use a different language, as some of my friends have, and they describe it back to me, and I think it's a particular discourse that comes from elsewhere, but I'm just fascinated by the fact that that discourse slips into this. Many people describe Gali Janardhan Reddy as a warlord. So, because there are actual assassinations that are going on across clans all the time. The last chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, Y. Rajshekar Reddy, YSR, was from Rayalaseema and was one of the head of the big clans. And the Congress picked him for that reason and promoted him as a leader, etc., etc., etc. Right? So now, why am I going from here to Gali Janardhan Reddy? Because Gali Janardhan Reddy is one of the biggest mining dons of that area. Gali Janardhan Reddy is seen as the person who funded the entire BJP election campaign for the BJP's rise into power in Karnataka. And one of the things that happened quite immediately after that was a very fascinating operation wherein Gali Janardhan Reddy and his clan and his army went to work in literally the few hours after the BJP government was created, wherein they took all the district boundary markers, right, which actually separated Andhra from Karnataka, and moved it several kilometers in. They created a new border between those two states in a matter of a few days. Right? Gali Janardhan Reddy owns private land in that area of several hundred acres, and through these processes has now control over several hundred square kilometers of space. Right? And it's take-up. That is, you give out daily contracts for mining. And the deal is very simple. 50% of what you extract belongs to Gali Janardhan Reddy. Right? There are also government lease lands which Gali Janardhan Reddy has control over. And so it's an entire operation that he runs in this space, which is a combination of quote-unquote legal mines that he has entitlement through actual leases with the government, and illegal mines through these kinds of space occupations that he's kind of what I'm calling a particular kind of negative space creation, wherein you don't know which state it belongs to. The administration has vanished because this administration, the administration of the state it's now supposedly part of, doesn't extend that far. And this state administration has no right to come there because it's supposedly part of a different state at this point. Right? And the tekas are given out literally on a daily basis. And I got onto the story when I was in Bangalore, and it was immediately after the 2008 financial crisis, and I got a taxi, and the guy started driving me. He was with me for half the day, and at one point we got talking, and he said he had just started driving taxi 6 months ago, and I said, why, what happened, what did you do before? He said I should drive the truck for carrying iron ore to the port, and I used to have a small company which used to do the extraction. And so it's from him that I've got the first round of details about the daily teka. That is, you have to go first meet somebody from the Reddy family, the Reddy brothers, and then they would put you in touch with one of their supervisors in one of the areas, and from him you have to collect a daily permit, because the accounting for the previous day's extraction, whether you have given 50% over, etc., has to be completed, and then you go back into the mine. Right? So it's this quote-unquote illegal and legal combination that's happening, and the extraction that's happening there.
So extraction is done by all these small, very small...
Yeah, it's a combination. Janardhan himself has full-fledged operations, right? And teka, that is, small parcels of land being given and 50% of it being extracted, etc. And of course, there's on the lease lands, and also on the some of the private land. So there are three kinds of land here, right? There's government land which is leased, there's private land that belongs to Gali Janardhan and company, and there's
occupied land.
Nobody knows whose land, right? I mean, this kind of created land, right? So three kinds, and extraction is happening in all three. And I myself am not fully 100% clear about the details of the specific differences between what arrangements work in each land, each part of the land. I've just made one trip into that area, and it was under some